Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for you and for your love for us, your tender, loving, fatherly care, and we look forward to what you'll be doing in us and through us in the year 2025. I pray that you bless the lesson today as we look into Daniel 11, a lot of kings. Help us to understand what you want to convey through these verses and how this really sets up the rest of the story within this final vision in the book of Daniel. So God, please bless this time. May you be glorified with the lesson and all this text and just a wonderful truth. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. So today, we're going to begin in earnest talking about the kings of the north and the kings of the south. The north being the Seleucid Empire, the south being the Ptolemy, the Egypt type that empire. And we'll see how much we can get into this person named Antiochus the Great. We'll talk a bit, hopefully we'll get into at least the rise of him, but maybe even down to his fall. And the reason why it's going to be important because Antiochus the Great is the father of Antiochus Epiphanes, who is the one that desecrates the temple, which we learn a little bit about in chapter 8. So this is a unit, and I think we'll get to a portion of the unit. So it's Daniel 11, verses 5 to 20. And it's going to be part 1, because it's probably going to be at least 2 or maybe even 3. And before I start in earnest, I want to clean up a few slides from before, from the previous lessons, a little bit. So here I combined a couple rows and tried to clean up just some of the kings as well as the timelines. I'll be sending you all these slides, so this is more for your notes. And then within Daniel 11, there were 6 Syrian wars. Okay? And this slide I've shown before, but there was a typo where the Third Syrian War had the wrong years. Just want to let you know that. Somehow I copied 202 to 195 into the Third Syrian War. Really it's 246 to 241. And then I showed these kings, and what we'll get to a little bit later is, for some reason, Ptolemy the 7th is missing in this list. I'll explain why. Or it's not in that order. And I don't know about you, but I love collecting coins. So here are some coins. So this is the kings of the north. And Seleucus the First is the first king after the Alexander the Great's empire broke up. And then the next king is Antiochus the First, then Antiochus the Second, and down the line. So we'll get to Antiochus the Great, and then the main character in chapter 11, toward the second half, is Antiochus the Fourth. So these are some coins that you can actually buy if you want. I think they cost about $300 to $600 in that range. And some of them have the description of what's on the back of the coin. They revere a lot of like certain animals or certain things that they think are of value or they look up to or they get their so-called power from, things like that. So these are just some of the coins in the kings of the north. And here are the coins from the kings of the south. So these are all 8 kings. So there is a Ptolemy the 7th. So we'll look into that just for a moment. So why is Ptolemy the 7th not on that first table? So here, as I mentioned, it skips. And the reason is the way the Ptolemies went down in history, there was a lot of change in leadership during these years between these 3 people. So you got the 6, Ptolemy 7 and 8, and this is a timeline of 180 BC to 121 BC. So what happened is Ptolemy the 6th was ruler from 180 to 169. Then for some reason he shared rulership with Ptolemy the 7th. So there's a gap here where 7 and 8, and then later on, after 169, Ptolemy the 6th and Ptolemy the 8th ruled together from 169 to 164. So somehow this Ptolemy the 8th rose up to co-share, and then after that, Ptolemy the 7th Ptolemy the 6th continues ruling, and then later Ptolemy the 7th rules for 1 year, and then Ptolemy the 8th. So it's kind of, you can look up into the rich history of this, but there's just a lot of changeover within that time frame. For us, we're not going to really deal with that much because Antiochus IV ends much earlier than this timeline. So we're not going to really deal with that part because I think Antiochus IV ends around in the 160s. So I'm not going to talk about what's beyond that. So that's why Ptolemy the 7th was not on that table. And this is an outline of the final vision of the book of Daniel. So what happened is we studied chapter 10 earlier, talking about the preparation of Daniel for this vision. And then the second big block is the predictions of the near future that has been fulfilled. So this is the part of chapter 11 that people just cannot kind of get their arms around. Wow, it's that accurate. So all that is fulfilled. And then the third block is starting in verse 36 of chapter 11, which is in the future. So this is an outline of this final vision. Okay. And again, I'll send you these slides. So as we look at number 2, the main block here of this near future that's historically fulfilled, we looked a little bit into the Ptolemies and the Seleucids back in the Persian period, verses 2 to 4, we studied that. And the focus for this week and next is what's in the red rectangle. So here, there's a lot of conflicts between North and South. So this is what we're going to talk about. And then eventually, Antiochus III, which has a nickname Antiochus the Great, starts doing a lot of battles. He actually was a great general, and he had, I think, reigned for like 37 years. So during that time, he just went all over in battle. And with that battle, all these battles, at the end, just to see here, he went a bit too far. And this is where he goes so far, and with that, he has to battle the Romans, who are way outside of the boundary of Seleucid Empire, but he goes and battles the Romans anyway. And that was a huge mistake. And we'll talk about that when we get there, but it is that dismal end that leads to the strange happenstances of Antiochus IV. So to better understand how Antiochus IV, how did he even rise in power, is like, where was he before he rose in power? And it was because of the dismal end of his father. So we'll look into that. So a little bit more detail. So this is what we'll go through today. I'll try to get to at least verse 12, maybe verse 16. We won't be able to cover everything, but that's the outline where we'll look into all these battles between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. and then how it leads to Antiochus III. All right, a lot of names, a lot of dates and kings and changes. So, just a quick recap of last time. We looked into the four winds of heaven, where Alexander the Great's empire broke up into four leaders, and Ptolemy and Seleucus are the two main ones. And last time we looked at Alexander's empire. His whole kingdom was uprooted, and all these wars between the various generals, the Didochi Wars, first, second, third, and fourth. There's just a ton of wars. A lot of key characters died in the process, and that led to the eventual four leaders that we saw in the previous slide. And why do we want to understand this? Is because this leads up to verse 5, where it's explaining, wow, this emergence of Ptolemy and Seleucus, this is the basis of these two lines of rulers that keep on fighting and fighting for the next dozen verses. Okay, so we looked at that Seleucus was an officer under Ptolemy during the war, so he was lesser, and then eventually he became greater, thus fulfilling verse 5. Now, when we get into verse 6, I want to explain just a little bit. After some years, that's the first phrase in verse 6. This is what happened in these years. Many things happened in what we call after some years, because Ptolemy I, he ruled till 282 BC, and then he died, and Ptolemy II ruled. And I stop at 252 because that leads into what's happening in verse 6. Seleucus I, he ruled till and died at 281. Then his son Antiochus I ruled for 20 years. And then Antiochus II ruled from 261, again leading up to the event in verse 6. So all that happened during this in the some years. And what's not mentioned is the First Syrian War broke out. Antiochus I versus Ptolemy II. The Second Syrian War broke out. And really, it was this Second Syrian War that broke out that led to a peace treaty. So this arranged marriage was, in a way, trying to end the Second Syrian War. Okay, there's been a lot of fighting for a long time. So the Second Syrian War is roughly 7 years long, and this is the time where, okay, let's have a peace treaty. So what happened is we see this peace treaty in verse 6 says they will have an equitable arrangement. That's the term for peace treaty or arranged marriage as a way of doing that. So the they, after some years that's Ptolemy II and Antiochus II, those two kings, they formed an alliance. Let's make an agreement, and I will give you my daughter, Berenice. That's the daughter of Ptolemy II, and I will give her to the king of the north in marriage. Okay, so this is to ratify an equitable arrangement, broker basically a peace deal between these two nations. So this is kind of saw a similar graphic before. So here, Ptolemy II has two children, Ptolemy III and Berenice. And Berenice is given to Antiochus II as a wife, as part of the peace treaty. Okay. Now, Ptolemy has a lot of power here, because what he did is he required Antiochus to divorce his wife, Leodice, and take on Berenice as his wife. So that's what he's doing. So with that, Antiochus II divorces her, takes Berenice as his wife, and then they have a child named Antiochus. So now it's getting crowded in the Antiochus the second kingdom. You got an ex-wife, you got a wife, and then you have a child. And then in addition, Antiochus II and Leodes, they had a child named Seleucus II earlier. So that's the scene. So with that comes the result. Unfortunately, she, that's Berenice, will not retain her power. And he won't continue to stand. That's Ptolemy, who's trying to have this peace deal. So, in time, Ptolemy II died. Okay. So Ptolemy II died, and when he died, the restrictions of Antiochus II was lifted. Now that Ptolemy II died, I can take back my wife. So now he takes back his wife, Leodes. Well, that didn't earn him any favors, because she takes revenge by killing her husband. You took me back, doesn't matter, I'm gonna kill her. So she kills Antiochus II. She also kills Berenice and kills their son. Okay, so she kills 3 people, and her son Seleucus II becomes king. Okay. All these are gone. And Ptolemy III, who was the brother of Berenice, he became king because Ptolemy II died, and he finds out about this arrangement, and he finds out, whoa, Leodes killed my sister? I'm going to get revenge. So Ptolemy III says, I'm going to get revenge. So what did he do? He avenged these crimes by killing Leodes. Okay. So Ptolemy III kills Leodes and goes as far as Babylon. So this is Egypt, and they're going all the way toward Babylon. That's a lot of miles. So she did not retain her power. So this death of Leodes, now you got the rulers of each kingdom fighting each other and having revenge, and this triggered the Third Syrian War. So this is 246 to 241. So verse 7 says, but one of her descendants of her line, beginning of verse 7, that is the brother of Berenice, or Ptolemy III. That's what it's saying by having that one of the descendants of her line. He will stand in his place. So he's standing firm. He comes up against this military force. He enters the fortress of the king of the north. So here, Ptolemy III kills Leodes, gets into Babylon, and starts and wins the war here. So he's traveled a lot and he's won. And with that, verse 8 says, all the gods of the metal images and desirable vessels of silver and gold, he will bring back into captivity to Egypt. So he goes all the way to Babylon, wins all that territory, and raids all their treasury, and brings it back to Egypt. That's what he's doing. Okay. So this is the start of this Third Syrian War, and Ptolemy III is so victorious. He carried off so much of the spoils of war, all these metal images and vessels and so forth. And the note here is he carried 40,000 talents of silver. 40,000 talents. 1 talent, depending on what country you measure the weight, is like 70 pounds. So you got 40,000 talents of silver. and also 2,500 precious vessels of and images of God. So what this is saying by him carrying off so much is that he basically wins over all the northern region of that's listed there along the way coming back. So he's taken over the rule of a lot of the Seleucid Empire. By taking the images means that he defeated them, he's stronger than them, and they had to give up all this treasury. So this is a big victory for Ptolemy III. Now the latter part of verse 8, I kind of grayed out because I want to cover it in the next slide. So now that he's won all that, it says he will stand back from attacking the king of the north for some years. So Ptolemy III stands back, meaning that he's won all this and he's back in Egypt. This third Syrian war ended, and Ptolemy III lived for 20 more years. He died in 221, and Ptolemy IV became the ruler. So here, as we look at this, there's one typo. Verse 9 is the king of the north, Seleucus, was able to mount a return attack to Egypt. So verse 9 is saying that king of the north, that's the latter of verse 8, will enter the king of the south, but he won't win. He returns back to his own land. So he tried to do something, but he was forced to return back. So why is this all put here is because this is now we'll see the beginning of the seesaw battle, the north and the south. All these verses that come, this is just an indication of, well, Ptolemy wins here for now, but then Seleucus and the north will win later, so it'll be back and forth. So this is the seesaw battles, and this sets the stage of all these battles with the Jews being in the middle. The Holy Land goes from one control, Syrian control, to Egyptian control, back and forth. This sets the stage for all this persecution that's going to happen. All right, so Ptolemy III wins. Well, what happens in the next verse? Verse 10, now Antiochus III wins for the kings of the north. And the Bible is really precise here because the beginning of verse 10 says his sons. So what happened is Seleucus II had two sons. Seleucus III, Antiochus III had two sons. And so the author of Daniel was using the sons to merge these two leaders that led the country, that were kings of the north. But Seleucus III reigned for roughly 3 years. He was very incompetent. So he was so incompetent, even though he had his nickname Thunderbolt given in irony, he was assassinated by his own troops because he lose so many battles, they lose so many comrades, they killed him. Killed their own leader, killed their own son. So with that, Antiochus III, being the younger son of the two, became king. But he was a great general. So with that, the king of the north won a lot of battles under his leadership. So it was really Antiochus III that assembled a great multitude of great forces, advanced like a flood, just wiping out a lot and regaining much of the territory, including Judea. So you remember Ptolemy III won all the way up to Babylon. Now Antiochus III wins all this back and wins through Judea and back. So this is a strip of, I want to say maybe 500 plus miles of territory. Very desirable territory. So here, this verse 10 about sweeping through like a flood, waging war, is referencing the Fourth Syrian War. This is from 219 to 217. So Antiochus III was the beginning of his great leadership and winning as a general. Now we get to the next verse. So it says, infuriate the king of the south, now that's Ptolemy IV, will march out to fight against the king of the north, that's Antiochus III. So here Ptolemy IV is going to go back to fight against Antiochus III. Judea is right about here. And through this, he that's so Antiochus attempts to win, and the Ptolemies invaded Palestine, and Ptolemy the Fourth sent a whole army to a city called Raphia, and he defeated Antiochus the Third. So here, Ptolemy the Fourth has won well, and he captured all the territory that was lost. So this is where the back and forth battles are, and Antiochus knew that he had lost, so he paid respects to the dead, and he returned to his own kingdom. He didn't want to fight here, and so basically Ptolemy the Fourth won that area without much of a battle, because he knew he was losing. So this Antiochus III just went back. So Antiochus the Fourth won, but in a way it was a very bittersweet win. And we'll see this. So verse 12 talks about this, and it's kind of cryptic unless you look through the history. So verse 12 says, when the army is carried off, so Antiochus the Fourth army carried off a lot of things. Antiochus the Fourth became arrogant. First he killed tens of thousands in that process, but then it says he will not triumph. So what's going on? Why didn't he triumph? This is his mistake. So here's a bunch of history. This Polybius is a historian. He wrote in his writings a book called History, book number 5. So Ptolemy became involved in the war with his subjects. He rose up and he defeated Antiochus. So it served the purpose of winning, but it proved disastrous because he gave them so much freedom, gave them the weapons, and they fought. And it's like, well, we won in Raphia, it was so easy, and why do we need the king? So they became thinking independent. To say, well, they refused any longer to receive orders from the king. So they said, oh, well, we can be kind of independent on our own. We don't need the king, so we did well. So before very long, that's what they did. They just kind of separated from the king. So the Egyptian people revolted probably because he taxed them so much and other things. So where these Egyptian people said, we don't like Ptolemy the Fourth to be our king. We can stand on our own. And then somehow mysteriously Ptolemy the Fourth dies. Most likely he was killed. But it's like, well, you're good. We don't need you, king. Okay. And I want to bring in another translation into this verse. So this is the New Living Translation. Don't like to use that very often, but I like the phrase toward the end where it says, his success will be short-lived. This is the latter part of verse 12. So this Ptolemy the Fourth, somehow he's able to get the people and supply them and do whatever things for them to win against Antiochus III, but he loses the trust of the people. So his success is short-lived. And he was overconfident, complacency. This is a quote from one of the historians. And it's so bad because all these people kind of rioted and don't like the king. It's a near collapse, really. So when he died, what was the next king? It's Ptolemy V, who was only 6 years old. He becomes king at age 6, so now he's, very much could be an occasion for political murders and coups. So here, this is dangerous. So now Ptolemy the Fourth is killed or dies. His son, 6 years old, is king. The other nation knows it, so they might get ready to come and take over. Got the 6-year-old, right? So here, Ptolemy the Fifth, his reign had to be legitimized because now you have a 6-year-old. You might have some people in the court the king's court to help him. But it's like, well, how do we gain back the trust of the people? Because they didn't like his father, he's dead, now you have the 6-year-old. Right? So, Ptolemy V, his reign had to be legitimized. So what did he do? Ptolemy V had to have support of the priest. The priest was a really big deal in that day. They had a lot of power. They led through a lot of religious practices and things that you would do. So Ptolemy V had to have the support of the priests. He consulted them because they were held in high esteem in the Egyptian society. Also, Ptolemy V, he was an Egyptian. So that's another thing you have to win over. He's actually a Greek. And you're try to rule Egyptians and you're not Egyptian. Right? Remember way back when Ptolemy, I think it was the first, he took Alexander the Great's body, somehow rigged it to come to Egypt. He buried Alexander the Great's body to prove legitimacy that I am good, I should be the ruler. So from there on, you can see all these Ptolemies, they're not Egyptian. they are Greek. So he had to win the favor of the people because of that too. So he lavished these favors upon them. He, in return, the priest would affirm his rule and begin urging the people to, okay, you guys also should support the king, right? So this is a lot of actions that were needed to do that. And what's neat is all this is recorded. It was recorded in an artifact found in July 1799 by a soldier of the Napoleon army in Egypt. In 1799, Napoleon's army somehow made a campaign to Egypt and they found this artifact which records these favors and some of the things that Ptolemy V did. Can you guess what that artifact might be? Yeah. It's the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone. You might have heard about the Rosetta Stone, and we hear the Rosetta Stone as a nice software program that you can learn, to speak another language quickly and so forth. Well, here's a picture of the Rosetta Stone on the left in the British Museum. And this picture on the right is a little closer up, and there's just a lot of different writings on it. So what happened was Ptolemy V, to convince people to support the king, the priests of the city of Memphis, which is a city in northern Egypt, issued a decree for that decree to be sent out to the people to obey. Okay. And this decree is called the Memphis Decree. Right? And this decree was engraved on large stones, like this. And it was erected in temples throughout Egypt. So there's a lot of these columns that had this decree engraved in it. And the most famous stone column with this decree is the Rosetta Stone. So this is how we know, Ptolemy V and the priests of that day wrote this decree as something that the people in Egypt need to follow. Okay? And so this is the Rosetta Stone, a different picture, and there's 3 sets of writings on it. And these 3 sets of writings record the same event. This is why you can use one set of writing to decipher the other set. So this is why the Rosetta Stone software is like you can learn anything, right? Any language. So this is the 3, the same event. So how does this decree go out? This is written on the Rosetta Stone or on the column. So then this decree shall be inscribed upon stela of hard stone, and in 3 languages, in Holy, in Native, and in Greek letters. And it should be set up in each of the temples in the first, second, and third, near the image of the ever-living king. So these three languages, one is called Imholi or hieroglyphics. So this is the language of the gods. Some of the parts of the Rosetta Stone might refer to language of the gods in the write-up. So one language is the hieroglyphics. One is in native, which is the native language of the Egyptians. That's called the Demotic. So language used in everyday purposes, and other parts of the decree might refer to this as language of documents. So that's the second one. And the third is Greek. This was set up during Alexander the Great's reign. So you have these three languages, and now, especially Greek was so well known, people could say, so this decree is written in Greek and means this. That means this hieroglyphics must mean this. And then they could start deciphering, all the other hieroglyphics, what do they mean? So this is really, really helpful to understand that. So, next few slides we'll be talking about the Rosetta Stone. And I won't read it word for word here, but basically there's a scholar of the Rosetta Stone, his name is mentioned at the bottom, where it really presents Ptolemy V as a benefactor, beneficent ruler. So he did a lot of financings of the priests and the people and try to help them out and all that. So, this is to hopefully legitimize his reign. That's the main thing. So here, it functions as a way to placate a lot of disgruntled Egyptians, lavish gifts upon the priests, right, and urge the people to pledge their allegiance to Ptolemy. So this is the main idea. So what are some of the favors? Well, confirm a temple revenue, so he's going to continue to tell the people to give your taxes, right? This is your revenue. He abolished the priestly fee, so there's no fee for certain priests. He abolished the priestly annual journey to Alexandria, so that saves him a lot of time and all the expenses to have to do that. Next one's interesting. Festivals are established in honoring of Ptolemy V. So the birthday of the king shall be celebrated each month. Okay, and anyway, all this stuff. Favored to win back the people, he reduced taxes. Okay, so there's a lot of things here. And he abolished conscription, so you don't have to sign up to be in the Egyptian army. Released some prisoners. And then also lastly, he did a lot of punishment for anybody that went against his father. So that's any punishment for the leaders of the revolt against Ptolemy IV. So here, just quick summary of the Rosetta Stone was such a wonderful find, because really we better understand what Ptolemy V's reign is and what he did and how he won back the people. All right, going to verse 13. So the king of the north will again rise a multitude larger than the first. And after some years he will advance with a great army and many supplies. So here, Antiochus III is the king of the north, and he went eastward because the Seleucid Empire is very large. He went eastward, won those, and gathered strength and wealth, and he got a lot of supplies. And then he went north, and this is where he went north to try to increase his territory that way. So this guy was so ambitious and wanting to gather more and more territory, more and more wealth, as he just keep on trying to expand. So over the next 14 years, this is after some years, he won a lot. We gained a lot of the whole Seleucid Empire. What was his goal really? Was trying to win back everything that Alexander the Great had. That was his grand goal. So he was going like huge, all this expansion. So the events leading up to this, so there's some gaps to fill. Antiochus III regains a lot of the Seleucid Empire. Meanwhile, we know that Antiochus IV died. Antiochus V is king. And Egypt is very vulnerable because he's still very young. Right? He was at 6, maybe now he's like 10, 12, 15 years old, 20 years old. And Egypt is vulnerable, but then what does Antiochus do? He makes a pact with Philip V of Macedon, and they try to team up to defeat Egypt. So this is where they're vulnerable. Egypt is weak, got a young ruler. Now Antiochus III, even after he conquered all this, that's not enough for him. He wants to team up with Philip V and go down and beat Ptolemy V. So this is known as the Fifth Syrian War. So part of what I want you to get out of this is Antiochus III was so hungry for power. He wanted so much. Okay. It's like he got all this territory this way. You recovered Judea. You got all the way on the east toward the outskirts near India. Now you're going up and you just want all this territory. So he goes to, and as he teams up with Philip V, and this is the Fifth Syrian War, this historian says this was thought of as a really bad behavior, really bad move, typical of kings of that day, that they should not do this. Okay, and this is what he says. He says, so this historian says, it's very surprising that as long as Ptolemy IV in his lifetime would need the help of Philip and Antiochus, they were ready to assist him. That was his father. But when he died, that didn't continue. So Philip and Antiochus did not continue to help out Ptolemy IV and just kind of help each other out, be good neighbors, so to speak. And instead, they wanted to devise a plan to really ruin this unhappy orphan, is what it says. So these two guys were kind to his father, but not to him. Because they think that he's a weak spot, I want to take this opportunity to win. Okay? So that's why these two team up to try to take over Egypt. And in a way, Egypt is so weak and is so kind of in turmoil. So verse 14, it says, in those times, many will rise up against King of the South, will rise up against Ptolemy V. Well, who are these many? Well, you got the native Egyptian people. Now you got Antiochus and Philip V's team coming down to also do that. So this is where there's so many violent ones. And in addition to that, violent ones among your own people, those are the Jews. So even some of the Jews were thinking, well, with all this turmoil, maybe this is the time of Yahweh coming. So they mistakenly thought, like, this is maybe Yahweh's on our side and we'll add to this overthrow. It's kind of a cryptic verse because there's so little to history that's written about this very thing. This is the wrong view, but anyway, that's just the turmoil that's happening in verse 14. So with all that turmoil, Antiochus III defeats Ptolemy V. It's just too much turmoil. Roughly a 20-year-old ruler with infighting within his own people, and even some of the Jews there in that area. He can't rally enough forces to beat Antiochus III and Philip V together. So Antiochus III wins, and he wins a lot of the Philistine Phoenicia area, including Judea. Now this is where it gets interesting. He wins so much, but he doesn't dare to invade Egypt. The last two bullets there. Why is because Rome was importing grain to as part of their commerce. So Rome had a lot of presence in Egypt. So here, Antiochus III didn't go in there because he feared Roman intervention. He feared Rome they're so powerful he couldn't beat them. So because they've been selling grain in that region, so he had to stop there. Okay, so he goes all the way down there. Once he gets to Egypt, so whoa, I see a lot of Roman soldiers and generals, I better stop because I can't win. So he stops. So what does he do? He can't win militarily, so what does he do? He offers his daughter as a way of trying to change Ptolemy V's mind in favor of him versus the Romans. Okay. So here, you got to remember Ptolemy V is still pretty young, maybe in his early 20s, right? So Antiochus III devises another way to win Egypt. So he made peace with Egypt in 197, and he gave his daughter Cleopatra as a wife to Ptolemy V. This is Cleopatra the First. You guys might be thinking of Cleopatra the Seventh, which is way down. Okay, this is the first Cleopatra the First. Okay. So here, what did Antiochus III hope? He hoped to take over Egypt through her, by her influencing Ptolemy V. But what happened instead? She was loyal to her husband. She didn't go with the plan. Okay. So Cleopatra I encouraged the Egyptian alliance with Rome to make Egyptians even stronger alliance with Rome, instead of undermining that alliance to weaken their connection with Rome so that they can take over. So this is what's described in this verse. So Antiochus III comes as a result of the force, reach an agreement with him, that's Ptolemy V. Antiochus III, that's he, will give his daughter Cleopatra in marriage to destroy it, but she, Cleopatra, will not stand with him or support her father. Okay. So as we kind of reflect back, it's like, wow, we saw one marriage alliance back in 252, that's back in verse 6. Now we have the second marriage alliance. So given Berenice, now given Cleopatra. And one commentator said the history of the conflict of the Seleucids and the Ptolemies is recounted in pedantic detail. There's so precise, minute detail. Every bit can be collaborated by other sources. This is why it's so mind-blowing that when people read Daniel 11, they say, it could not have been written beforehand. It could not be prophecy, because all these details are in here, and it's collaborated by all the history. And there's many historians that have recorded these events that you can match it up. Let's see if we get through this. Okay. So verse 18, Antiochus III, in verse 18 says, then he, Antiochus, turned his attention to the coasts and islands and captured many, but a commander will be put an end to his taunting. Instead, he will turn his taunts against him. Now, this is a really loaded verse. It's like there's a lot in here. So what happened at the end of the Fifth Syrian War, Antiochus III kind of failed to conquer Egypt. What does he do? He turns to the coastlands, and so this is the coasts and islands that are toward Greece. It's like, if I can't win here, I'm going to try here. It's like he just keeps on wanting to fight to try to win. And initially he was very successful. He captured quite a number of places in the little islands here. But then when he went to thrice and three territories, what happened? That's borderline where the Romans are. So Rome is here, Greece is here, and he's here. So now he's going like this. Well, now Romans are coming. They're starting to expand, but at a very early stage. Now they butt heads. This is what's going on. So the Romans defeated him at Thermopylae in 191, and very decisively in Magnesia in 189. So this is where he went too far, and this will cost him big time. This is the end of his really reign, and it's going to cause a ripple effect that will last throughout the chapter. So what is this? Who is this commander? So the city, Magnesia, so this commander, Lucius Scipio, he decisively beats Antiochus III. So this is where a commander will put an end to his taunting. He beats him, right? And he beats him, and with that beat, he presented conditions for peace. So now this commander from Rome beats Antiochus, presents this Treaty of Appia, and this treaty is so humiliating to the Seleucid Empire. It is so bad, and we're going to go through a little bit of the detail of this treaty. It's definitely one-sided. So this ended the Roman-Seleucid War. The treaty took place after these battles. Okay. Just to kind of give you a framework, if you read history, some of it might mention that Anatolia, that is the red area, that's kind of Turkey. So you see on the left side of that, that red figure, you see Magnesia there. And then if you go a little bit toward, you see Athens, and this is where Thermopylae would be, somewhere around there. So here, Antiochus III keeps approaching this area more and more. He loses there, so he retreats all the way back to the rest of his empire, which is still a lot, but he just kept going. And that's the problem. He just kept going, and he got defeated, and so he was able to keep this part because Rome wasn't ready to expand further yet. But anyway, Antiochus III suffered a lot through this because he went through all these battles. You got to remember, 191, 189, several years of battle. So there's a lot of costs incurred during all this fighting and loss of life. So what is this treaty? Antiochus III must abandon Europe altogether. You have to leave town. You have to get out of it. And all of Asia west of the Taurus Mountains. So wherever he approached, he has to go all the way back. Second, he has to surrender all his war elephants. That's a huge deal, war elephants, right? He was limited to 12 warships. So Rome had control of how many warships he can still have. And it's the purpose to keep the subject under control. But he's allowed to build more if they were attacked. He's barred from recruiting any mercenaries. Or any fugitives. So, and the next one is huge. Antiochus must give 20 hostages. And the Roman consul will select who those 20 are. And the hostage should be changed every third year. So that's another requirement. So now we've got Seleucid Empire here. These 20 hostages have to be in jail in Rome. That's part of the deal.
Excuse me.
In the future, he maintains no elephants, no war elephants, must pay for the cost of the present war. That is huge. Why? It's incurred on his account. You have 500 of these talents. Each talent might be slightly different depending on which nation, but so he has to pay 500 talents immediately, 2,500 more talents when the Roman Senate ratifies the treaty. So he has to pay 3,000 talents right away, and then 1,000 talents of silver to be delivered to Rome annually for the next 12 years. he has to deliver 15,000 talents of silver. 1 talent is about 70 pounds. How do you get 70 times about 70,000 pounds of silver annually? That is a lot. That is part of the deal. He has to do all that. So there's also talking about a bunch of corn as well, so grains. And there's still even more terms of this. He must surrender to us all prisoners and deserters to his enemies, things like that. And if you accept these conditions without guile, we will grant him peace and friendship subject to the Senate's ratification. So this is the terms of this so-called treaty that he has to do. So, Antiochus has no choice. So what's going on? All the terms offered by Scipio were accepted by the ambassadors. So Antiochus III accepted all the terms. That part of the money, which is to be paid down, and the 20 hostages were furnished. One of those hostages is Antiochus IV. So just as a way of keeping you in line, you're going to have to send your son to the Roman jail while you keep paying every year. Okay. So Antiochus III had 2 sons. The oldest one is Seleucus IV, and then you had Antiochus IV. But then the condition was you have to send Antiochus IV as one of the prisoners. And every year he gets to swap hostages, but not him. He always stays there. Just like that is the severity of this treaty. He lost so bad, he had to give up not only the war elephants and the ships and so forth, but he had to pay all these war damages, and he had to give all these hostages. So this is why he should not have ever entered that fray at all. Okay. And there's even some aftermath. These kings generally accept within their lifetime any treaty they sign, but after they die, their heirs don't really continue honoring the treaty. That's kind of how it usually works. But these terms are just so harsh, penalties, and this is where the Seleucid Empire now is reduced to just Syria, Mesopotamia, and Western Iran. It's really shrunk. And here it's weakened them so bad that they have to pay for all these penalties. So can you just imagine 70,000 pounds of silver every year? Where are you going to get that? Right? Where are you going to get that? And later influence, I'll let you read this on your own. This is just some other things that they refer to. There's some notes as to why did he do it. I think this was a good reason. I'll let you read through that. But he had to accept. And the one thing I wanted to wrap up with this last slide is verse 19. So he, that's Antiochus III, will turn his attention back to the fortresses of his own land. So he returns back to his own land after being defeated. But he will stumble, fall, and be no more, meaning he died. But what did he do? He turned back to his own land, so now what's weighing on his mind is the penalties he has to pay. So to raise funds to pay the Romans, what did he do? He pillaged various temples because they had treasures. So he goes to this temple, and he learned that in the temple of Bel there's a large stockpile of silver and gold. So ill-fated that he raided it because the people heard about it, they had pillaged his temple, and so these people killed him. What are you doing? These are our sacred temples and treasuries, and you're robbing us of this? What gives you the right? So he was killed. So this is how Antiochus III dies. And so here, as we kind of, look into what's happened is After all these events, now Seleucus IV is king. Meanwhile, his younger brother is in jail in Rome. So Antiochus III had a lot of wins and losses, but he just was so ambitious and way beyond what he should have done. And this is really a historic turning point because he was trying to do all these things and his conquests, and then this military move was just a gigantic mistake. Gigantic mistake because he was defeated in Thermopylae in 191, in Magnesia in 189, and it fulfilled the prophecies of Daniel 11, 18, and 19. And this paved the way for larger Roman expansion. We'll find out in the leading up to the New Testament. But this bullet, I want to read this one. Antiochus the Great would have gone down in history as one of the great conquerors of the ancient world if he had been content to leave Greece alone. He did not leave Greece alone. And instead, he fulfilled the prophecy. Returned his own land, defeated and broken, and was killed trying to plunder a temple. So here you see the succession of Antiochus the Great to Antiochus IV. And these remarkable prophecies fulfilled by history is so accurate, there is the unmistakable imprint of divine inspiration. This is amazing. And you just kind of read through these verses and see how all this history played out. The accuracy is so amazing, and this God-inspired word, and it also leads into why Antiochus III died, and the circumstances of Antiochus IV. Now we'll find next time, how did Antiochus IV, being in jail in Rome, how did he get out? And when he got out, how did he become king? Because Seleucus IV is king. And then how did he weasel his way into power and other things? So this is where there's so much intrigue, there's so much personality within Antiochus IV that we learned back in Daniel 8. Now you'll see it in action in here, in Daniel 11. Somehow he gets out and he becomes king. And he does all the abomination of desolation and other things. So we'll learn that next time. Okay. Let me close in the word. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. It's so accurate. It's so amazing as it's these prophecies spoken about centuries ago before it happened, indeed happened. And we know that you're the God of history. You're the sovereign God over all things, and we see your remarkable handprint and inspiration just all throughout these verses. And God, may we just appreciate that more as that if we're a child of yours, we know that you're all powerful and all in control, and we can just rest in you.